Let's go. So, hello everyone. Good morning, good afternoon, good evening, depending on where you are in the world. Welcome to the Let's Talk Tech event. And today we're going to be interviewing Iulia Campagnola. Um, she is going to be our third person in this series. I move the microphone to Cindy. Can you introduce yourself?
Yeah, of course. Hi, everyone. My name is Nyamho, but you guys can call me Cindy. It might be easier for you to say. My role in this club for the Google Developer Student Club at the University of London is public relations. I really want to thank you all for coming to watch this event. I will be one of the interviewers alongside Sebastian for this event. Yulia, could you introduce yourself? I think you can do it better than I can, or Sebastian can for you.
Hi everyone. I'm Iulia. I am currently living in London, so hello from London. Here's early afternoon. Um, I thank you very much for all the organizing, to Nyamhu, to Sebastian, to Tan, and everyone putting the effort into organizing this. I hope you find something insightful for someone who has just started their career in tech, and or some for someone else, perhaps who's changing careers the way I am.
Good. Just a friendly reminder to everyone, there's a Q&A section, so feel free to drop any questions, and Cindy will make sure to read them and ask them to Iulia. So don't feel afraid to put your questions so you can get an answer. So, well, your history is interesting because you are a career changer. You came from another industry and now you work into tech. So, the first question I would like to make is like, what made you want to go into that specific path for your career? Is there anyone or anything that inspired you?
Uh, yes. I mean, it wasn't an immediate decision. I knew that I wanted to leave my previous career, but I actually wasn't totally sure what to do, and I didn't really have a lot of time to actually brainstorm and make a decision because work was taking a big time in general from my life, I would say. I made a mid transition, change career in the middle between the two, hospitality and currently tech, which was as an administrative position, such as like a executive assistant, like a secretary, basically. And I've been working during that time a lot with the IT company that my office was relying on for any IT issues that would come up. And we actually um, relied on them a lot during that period because it was during COVID period, and the entire office just made like a big change, like the entire computers had to be changed, the entire system, they were moving everything to the cloud, like a lot going on. And so I was a lot in touch with the supervisor of the project, and he was coming often to the office, and I started telling him like, why don't you just teach me how to do this or how to do that instead of coming to the office for, the smallest thing. Or it's also for me to perhaps like fix something easier instead of like having my colleague like, being stressed that he cannot carry on with his work. So there's been this kind of like mentorship for a little bit of time. And from there, he started also to send me even like webinars, courses that for him would be free, but he just didn't have time to join them because he was working. And it started from there. And also just I started also myself to kind of dig deeper into it, to do some courses myself. And because, tech is such a wide industry, you can go in many, many paths. But yeah, I kind of like, I just thought like, oh, probably, the world may be speaking to me, like maybe this is the place. And he told me the world, like, I do think that you're made for this. I feel like you have some natural skill to doing that. So I was like, well, good news. I enrolled in a uni thanks to you. Yeah, that's how it started.
That's really interesting. So how did you exactly navigate this transition from your career from hospitality to this tech industry and like studying at UoL and landing the job and everything?
Um, it was a very bumpy road, and I mean we're here also to tell the truth because everyone thinks like, oh, everyone's life is like smoother. No, absolutely not. I was, imagine that in hospitality I was working like 16 hours a day. I was sleeping for 4 or 5 and then go back to work. I was like really like almost burnt out, and my timing was also like not very good because I reached the point of like, oh, I want to leave, but I don't. And that's why also I decided to take that like mid step. Like we are all people who need to work or study, you know, like someone is on the first role, so they're trying to learn as much as possible to impress the first employer, or other people who like, I live in London. London is really expensive. I cannot just afford stopping, not working, need still to pay rent and the bills. So this was when it came the idea to transfer my skills to another role. And the nice thing about London is that it does give you that opportunity to change and to try something new, uh, without having that, you know, without being scared, thinking like, even if it's not for you, it was still like a learning experience. Thanks to the being a secretary, I found out that I want to work in tech. So it came something good out from it. Um, so yeah, so I left also hospitality on the 1st of March 2020, and 20 days later, UK went into a full national lockdown, which was then it became an international lockdown. So they were all like, "Are you sure you want to leave?" But not in my wildest dreams. I would thought that, you know, what would have come in 20 days later. But I really wanted to leave because I really wanted to preserve my health, you know, mental health. Um, so yeah, I left anyways. So I was jobless during COVID time. Um, and I just kept applying anyways. I kept applying and applying and applying until, you know, a lot of no's, but at the end someone took the leap of faith and hired me, and that's how I started in an executive assistant. And then from there, 2 years later, like 1 year later, I what my other tactic I would say was, okay, let's work in an now like first office was like a finance office, so it didn't really have anything to do. So like, okay, let's work as an executive assistant but for something tech related, so I can start talking to those colleagues, learn from their experience, what are they learning, what technologies they're using. And that's what happened. I found a job in the startup I'm working right now. um and they knew I would start uni. They knew I wanted to transition from EA to some tech role. So, and they took me anyways because they wanted to help me do that. Um, Actually, I left 5 months later because I really didn't want to work as an executive assistant anymore. I really wanted to focus on the studies. Um, so what happened then? A few months later, I found a job in IT. But I found out that wasn't really made for me because it was really still very, although like there's like I like computers involved, it was still very similar to hospitality. So I just felt like I was going a little bit back to my previous steps. Um, so that's why I left, and then the company like texted me again and said like, we're actually having a tech role for you now. Do you want to come back? And I went through the whole interview process, and here I am.
All right. Oh, I think Sebastian is muted.
Oh yeah. So speaking of studies, I want to ask you another question. So what made you feel interest into studying computer science at the University of London? What did make you choose this program?
The first thing was because of the fact that it was online. I needed that flexibility in order to keep working and again surviving in a big city. an expensive city like London. I really loved this city, and it didn't really make it really make any difference if I would study here or study, go back home and not pay rent or anything. But it's still a city of opportunity, so I decided to stay here. And yeah, and University of London, especially our course, gives us that opportunity to study and but also like following the course whenever you want. My boyfriend, I was mentioning before to Nyampu, he's doing UoL as well, but in finance. But for example, they have to join, like they have mandatory every 2 weeks, they have mandatory lessons, online lessons that they need to join. Otherwise, if they skip more than 2 or 3, I don't remember, like they can fail the course, which with in our course, computer science, doesn't happen. So it does give that flexibility, or even like to replay things that you don't understand, and the material. And again, University of London, I just say that it's a University of London, it still has its name, and gives that a little bit of extra status, perhaps when you're trying to compete against other applicators. Especially because now we are in a place where you compete also from a lot of skilled people that haven't been pursuing the traditional route, have been have done a boot camp or just self-taught, and they're just like really really skilled by themselves. So for me, for a person who has changed career, who will graduate in her 30s, needs a little bit that extra, push, whatever I can get to actually make my resume more appetizing to future employees, I'll get everything. So that was the reason, yeah.
It's very great to hear, Iulia. We're rooting for you.
Thank
So
you.
now that you're in your new career path, so compared to your like previous career, what aspects of the new career path align with your values, interests, and like your long-term goals?
The best example I can give is actually directly with the values of the current company I'm working in. Usually startups, they have this thing to like create their own values, and more tech companies, they're following doing that, which I think it's great because you can already in advance kind of assess if that's a company you want to work for or not. And in this one, there's like 3, which is aim high, run fast, practice radical candor, and learn from everything. Uh, Starting from learn of everything, I think it just makes sense. I mean, we are in an industry where, especially now with like ChatGPT coming out, if you're not, learning and updating your skills with the latest technologies, you can become like, or your skills can become really obsolete really soon. Um, and just the fact that the company helps you doing that. It's not like they just say like, oh, you need to be up to date, otherwise you cannot work here. It's more like they give you the tools and the help to do that. And they actually, compared to many interviews what I did, which was like, oh, I'm studying and working at the same time, their question was always, oh, how are you going to do that, how are you going to balance that? Their question was, okay, what do you need to success in, to be successful into that? We'll give you every help you need. Or do you need more time? Do you need someone to help you, someone to mentor you? Anyway, they give you those tools to support you, which was great. Radical Candor, it's actually a book that they actually took the expression from, which I suggest for future leaders. I suggest everyone to read it. Which, it's in a nutshell, it just says be honest and give feedback to your peers and to your colleagues, harsh or not harsh, but don't do that just for the sake of doing it because you want, to give the feedback. Do that because you care about that person. Do that because you strive and you really aspire for their improvement and their development. And yeah, that's what it is. And the last one is aim high, run fast, which is just means, that just the fact that they love what I'm doing, and that's how it also like reflects to their value. I aiming high, I'm changing career, I'm investing my money, my time, and my effort to do that. And And also as a company, they also, of course, aiming high, because at the end of the day, we need to make money. We need to, and hopefully become a unicorn startup and open an IPO and so on. So yeah, and it's exactly my same value. So I think it's like perfect.
It's very supportive and very like endearing to hear that your company is very supportive of you to do your career change. So regarding support and resources and what you relied on, are there is there anything else that you really found helpful or you relied on to help you make your career change?
I think I love how much we as an industry, especially because I see the difference between what my boyfriend is going through, like learning finance, and our industry. We are very supportive to one another. We know everyone knows how hard is our industry. Like, it's hard to code. It's hard to understand code. It's hard to navigate all these things. And we just keep building more and more tools, sometimes too many, that help us to become better, to become faster, to understand things, or all these free courses that we have online, uh, out, like tutorials on YouTube. It's just like there's this kind of feeling of camaraderie, or even just websites. There's websites for people uh, volunteering, being mentors for other people, and it's free. Or you can even just text someone on LinkedIn and ask them, like, can you be my mentor, please? And we would understand. We understand why. We understand it's hard and it's something to navigate, but no one will ever say no. So I love that. I love that, like how we help each other, compared to like finance, where like everyone is just like doing their thing, just studying their thing, and then hopefully they'll pass their exam and move on. uh, when there's like this constant communication between us one way or the other. So yeah, I think that's great. Yeah, as a tool.
No, I totally agree with that. Like for example, in our community, within the Bachelor of Science, Computer Science, University of London, you feel that sense of, you have someone that can support you. You have someone to ask questions. So yeah, that's great to hear. That's also like that, or you felt like that out there.
Yeah, just the
So
fact that we have Slack. Sorry,
yeah.
we have a Slack channel with all. When like my boyfriend, they like made like a WhatsApp group between some of the people. Just that, like, it's mind blowing for me. But yeah,
Yeah.
to add.
So just to give everyone a reminder, there's a Q&A, and please put your questions for Iulia so we can get them answered. And moving on, let's move on to the interview and stage questions we have prepared for you. So to land the job, how did the process go in your experience? Could you share step by step what the stages were?
It was the scariest thing I've ever done. Although I knew the people, I knew my colleagues, that we were colleagues before, because as I mentioned, I was working as an assistant for them. But it was still like really terrifying. And I think that's fine, because if you're not scared, if you like, the thing no one ever appreciated when someone is overconfident, because that means like probably like you will stop learning if you're like overconfident. Like, no, like it's good to have that push a little bit. Um, but the stages where I first had a call with the director of operations, she's the person taking care of, let's say, like the human resources part of the team, just to kind of make sure that I still align with the interest of the company, and what are my aspirations, if this really, if this is really something I'm interested in. And then from there, the second call was the director of engineering, um, who I actually, I've been like really honest. Imagine that I've done that call after like the first year at our uni, and I told him what were the skills I learned so far, which was, as like, okay, you want me to kind of work in support, so it's not this. So this is also one thing to just clarify. This is not support as IT support. This is more support as in debugging, or like finding like, okay, this is not working, find the bug, find where it's coming from, and then assign it to the engineer who actually who build that probably, and then can fix it back. um So just understand their code. We're using a lot of like different languages that I have not used. Like we use JavaScript with p5.js, and the rest of our first year was math. So yeah, I did of course a little bit of like courses myself here and there, like just to brush up a little bit Python or things like that. But I felt really underskilled compared to what I felt was what was their expectation. But every time here I was telling him like, oh, I don't think it, like, yeah, okay, we'll see. Well, and then the third interview was the technical interview where they showed me a problem, like a piece of code, and had to resolve the code. And then there was like a follow-up call with what they thought, with their thoughts, and how, given how I reacted to the problem, how can I fit into the team? And then the final was just the answer to the call.
I see. That's very interesting. So, you mentioned like languages and like your company uses very many languages and like technologies and such. Would you say that's the most difficult part about the entire interview process for you, or was there regarding that, like how did you overcome it? Whether it's emotionally or like mentally or like physically.
Yeah, so yeah, the technical interview was definitely the hardest part of the interview, I think for everyone, is because that's where you actually really try to make an impression. And yes, what I did first, I did ask them in advance what they would be covering, and they were nice enough to kind of suggest like, oh, it's gonna be Python and we're gonna be covering this topic. So I had a little bit of time to prepare and to kind of like just go through Python a little bit again. But then it wasn't really about that because we were also so used to work with brackets, as an IDE, and then all of a sudden you get all the tools and everything from VS Code, which for someone who perhaps hasn't been really interacting with it at the beginning, it is really intimidating as a process. And but what they were really interested in, it was actually listening to my train of thoughts. Our job is actually, it implies resolving problems or finding a solution to a particular, like, okay, find a solution to how to make this work, or we need to create this component in here. So it was really about like, okay, you understand, okay, you're giving me like there were like 6 different functions, like what is the first function doing, what is the second function doing, kind of break down the code, try to understand, make questions. You don't understand what is this doing or what does this mean, because probably you don't know Python so well, you can make the question, and then from there they start giving you also somehow like suggesting you like, okay, probably I can do this or I can do that, um, and then from there, sorry, my cat is scratching the door. Um, yeah, and then basically, yeah, it was just this train of thought. They just wanted me to understand how would I approach the problem and how would I try to find a solution to it. It wasn't really about finding a solution to it. In the end, we did, but it was with their help. So that's why, like at the beginning, I thought, oh, I didn't make it. Like, I don't think they will take me because I didn't resolve the problem myself. I resolved it like, it's like if it wasn't for the help they gave me, I wouldn't have resolved the issue. But then like on a follow-up call, they told me like, don't worry, this is a problem that even like an experienced engineer could feel threatened by. So it wasn't about that. Although like also like, yeah, they were trying just to be nice to me, like there's no way, but actually in the end like I did pass, so which was like really nice of them. And yeah, here I am.
Nice. That's good to hear. So, what would you say was the most enjoyable part about the entire interview process?
I think it was just the support, and just the fact that they did understand, they did listen, because I thought at the beginning they were not listening because I kept telling like, oh, I have never coded in Python, and then why are you giving me like a Python exercise. Or so yeah, I didn't felt like I felt that at the beginning I thought it was very robotic, like okay, we listen, but we actually like doing things the way we always did, like doesn't matter what you just said. But then I understood what it actually meant. So like okay, as I explained in my previous answer, it does make sense. Um, so yeah, the fact that like they actually do listen and they do adapt to your skills and your situation, that was like the most enjoyable part.
All right, thank you for answering that question. So that is it for the interview stage. Just a reminder to the audience, if there is any question regarding the interview stage or just like the interview or just the whole event in general about Iulia, please feel free to leave them in the Q&A section. But yeah, so moving on to the landing the job questions. So that was what it was like for you to be in an interview. So when you actually landed the job, how was it for you to like integrate yourself in terms of like the technical skills you had at that time?
Yeah, if I felt that the interview was terrifying, then what came next was actually double. And which I do think it's normal, and that's something that like every person who starts in this field that like should just came at peace with. There's no way you can, or if you can, kudos to everyone who can, but for mortal people like me, it was really, really intimidating. And also because the first meetings, I would understand 5% of the entire conversation. Um, but one thing that I did was like find those like actually, yeah, don't be in the room where you feel comfortable in, because then that means like you're not learning anything. So I just took those people who would like that could directly help me with, the things I was getting assigned to do, and just hold on those people, latch on their arm, latch on their leg, doesn't matter, don't let them go as much as you can. If they can give you that, like, you see they have the patience and they do take the time to teach you things, shut up and listen and absorb everything they have to say. It's just the best way to learn things, especially because you're also trying to adapt. It's not just in general like learning about like software engineering or coding. It's just like learning the job itself and try to actually integrate yourself with the company and your role. So uh, yeah, it was just that. It's just like the best resource where are your colleagues. They are full of information and knowledge, which just take it. The moment then after that, it was just the moment I started to kind of like get more acquainted and comfortable with my role. That was the moment where I would start like getting like understanding what do I actually like doing and what other things I'm still having a little bit of difficulties. They, for example, they assigned me in a squad because our at work we are like divided in squads. We have the teams as data science team and front end team and back end team, but then we are divided in squads, and each squad takes care of a part of our product. So in each squad, there's like one or two front-end engineers, one back-end engineer, one data scientist, so on and so forth. So we can all work together on something in particular. And they did put me at the beginning with the squad that was mainly taking care of like the DevOps part. So it was I think it was very uh, yeah, it was really hard for me to understand because they were really getting very technical, and I felt like I couldn't really help so much, especially again because like what we learned was JavaScript. Like okay, um, so they taught me a lot of things. I took everything on board, but then like when finally I got a little bit more comfortable, I just shared that with my supervisor and I told them like, let's be honest, I'm not. I know like I could help more in front end because of my skills so far rather than here. And then in case the moment like at least I'm working until at least I'm contributing more. And then the moment I'll get more comfortable and perhaps learn more things at uni as well, or doing some extra courses, then, maybe I can go back or like do other things. And they did listen to that, and they did put me in a squad where I'm basically helping in front end. And but at the same time, of course, like I'm still support. So if there's any help or anything that needs to be debugged or anything in uh, in the back end or in the data pool or anything, I'll help with that. And if I cannot do that just myself, just again ask help from some other engineer. That's all.
Okay, that's really nice to hear. So looking at the chat, we have a question from Ophelia. So she asks, I have a question about the job interview process. I have applied for about 300 jobs in IT, and while I actually enjoy in-person interviews, meeting the recruiters, I struggle a lot with the job application process because there's always some kind of proctored video and strictly time challenge on a platform like HackerRank or LeetCode. And I feel like the challenges on such platforms are a really high level, and they have a really high level of difficulty. So when you apply for the jobs that you have worked in, do you also have to do a proctored and timeline assessment constructing an algorithm? Because personally, I have never seen any jobs where you get an interview without passing these kind of tests.
Yeah, that sounds like a lot, to be honest. Especially if it's, I mean, if it's one of your first jobs, in IT, they usually care more about your people skill. I mean, I don't know the exact, maybe if you can share the exact position that you trying to apply. But for example, I worked in first line support engineer in an IT company, and yeah, even more like I it's how can I say that in like in a nice way? Um, it's an internship. They are the ones trying to help, it's your first job. They should be the one trying to understand what are your needs and what can you learn. Like you are learning from them. It's not the other way around. If they're going really too much, I think they're just trying to take you as a low paid replacement for an actual role, which I do think it's quite of a red flag from the company. So don't take it as a how do you say, as something that is wrong with you, but take it as a fact, like, because don't forget, like when you do interviews and when someone actually gets in touch with you or the other way around, it's not just an assessment for the company to know you. It's also an assessment for you to understand if that's the right company you can you work for or you will be working for. They're human beings. Just to give, I think the best. So no, just to answer your question first. No, I didn't get such hard questions. Uh, Unfortunately, I don't have like I have to tech experience as interviews, but if I do see that they become way too hard or if they take a long time, sometimes they give you those take at home assignments. And in some companies which demanded this extra capital one, Sky Expedia, for instance, for internship experience with Expedia, they made you code a super hard algorithm with C++ in 10 minutes. Yeah, I mean, again, I understand that they want, the best of the best. And of course, unfortunately, we are in a very competitive world where you can get, the very smart software engineer who is at his first job but is already a half genius who can do that, and kudos to him. But like in a real world, it doesn't matter the industry. I worked in 2, 3 other industries. As an internship, you go there as a person who needs to learn. And if they will, because imagine what your life is going to be if this is what they take asking from you on your on your interview, and the moment you start, this is going to be your life while you are still learning, still studying. It's going to be really stressful. So I do think, at least like I'm talking about Europe, that's where I've been working in many countries in Europe. It is a very stressful process. Absolutely, you'll have to send hundreds of CVs. You'll receive 99% of the time a no. Then that 1% will get in touch with you, and still the process will not go as well as you thought. But yeah, don't take it as a defeat. That's the word. Don't take it as a defeat, because for me in these cases, I would say, thank God I didn't join, because if this is the way they approach people who have just started to learn, I don't want to think about what would be my life if I would work there. Yeah. So yeah,
Well,
don't take that like there's something wrong with you. You're just starting, you're just learning. There's no way in hell that, like, if you wanted a genius, pay for the genius who, pay for a role. Don't ask for an internship. It doesn't make absolute no sense. That's all.
I hope you found that helpful, Ophelia. And feel free to leave any other questions in the chat. Everyone who is here attending will answer in due time. So continue with the questions we have prepared. So you already mentioned Python and that you use that in your interview, well, many often. But okay, what other kind of technologies like languages, libraries, frameworks, etc., do you use on a day-to-day basis in your area of work?
So as mentioned now, like I am aspiring to be a front-end engineer. So I work a lot with React, so TypeScript and JavaScript, um, Tailwind CSS, and yeah, of course, like HTML, JSX. Then in support, for debugging, I also use a lot Insomnia, which is just a tool that helps to see how the queries that you're making, how is the data coming back, if it's correct or not. Then as generic tools, not really a part of like the tag, but like we use Jira to kind of organize our squad work, and also the support, also our support cards, because they are flagged internally. They are flagged by our colleagues internally. It's not like a support role as helping clients, external clients who are using our product. It's more like, oh, this engineer was working on this, and or this other colleague has been working with this part of our product and something is not working. So yeah, mainly that. Then of course in the company we use as well Python, as I said, and Golang. They're trying to move a lot of like pieces, chunks of code to Golang now. And yeah, for like databases, it's BigQuery, GraphQL, a bit of Postgres, I think. Yeah, that's the one.
All right, great. Thank you for answering. Moving on to the next question. But before we do, I really like where you mentioned about where you shouldn't be working in a room where you're like really comfortable. There should be like the uncomfortability to where it pushes you and makes you want to learn certain skills. So that being said, what approach do you take learning like new skills, such as like languages, frameworks, and such in your line of work?
Again, I know that not everyone's experience will be probably like mine. I do retain myself quite lucky with the company I'm working for. But said that, usually we have this break, I would say, sometimes between one semester to the other, which I do take advantage of to kind of catch up with knowledge gaps that I feel that I have, in order to make work better in my position. So for example, like trying to learn a bit better JavaScript, the ES6 version, or TypeScript, for example, and again, tools, we do have lots of tools for that. We are very lucky into working in this industry that provides many resources. My favorite one is Free Code Camp, to be honest, because you do have the website with a lot of courses there, but then at the same time, if you go on their YouTube channel, you have another entire world with more and more courses, which are not much more different than our UoL courses. They're just like, instead of like having many separate 5-10 minutes videos, is just all put together in like an 11-hour video, and then you go with that. And the other thing that the company is doing, it's called 10%, which is just taking 10% of our time every week or every 2 weeks and use that time for different reasons. Someone can use that to do some extra research or try to experiment with something for a product, whatever. Or you can just keep going with your learning. So the company has provided me with a React course. So every week for 2 hours, because I work part-time, so it's about 20 something, 24 hours work every week, because I work 3 days a week. So 2 hours and a half every week. I use that to block the time. No one bothers me. It's in my calendar. They see it, and I just dive into React and keep going with that, since I cannot do that during, afterward, because we have our university courses to carry on with.
Yeah, that's amazing to hear. The fact that your company provides that much support for you to learn, and that's something you mentioned from earlier. It's part of their culture, so that's something really amazing. You're muted. Sorry.
Sorry. Yes, I'm sorry. I'm really happy about it. I think it was just the fact that I just when I was in hospitality, I worked for 6 years and I changed 8 different hotels I worked in, and then in 2 years as an assistant, I worked in 2 separate offices. So I could never like find my place. And I think just the fact like the more I was working, the less patience I had with the way we were treated, because it wasn't just me, just the entire team, the way we were treated. Um, I just I couldn't carry on with that. So yeah, I think like I found the place, definitely.
Yeah. So, well, this is an interesting question. So, which is the most used project management methodology used within your company? Is there any like agile methodology
Yeah,
you use and you have to
it's
comply to? How does that work?
it is definitely the agile methodology, for the simple reason that we are a startup. We need to use agile because if while we're working, if we at a certain point, not really me again, although like my feedback it's valued as anyone else's feedback, but like if the management uh realizes that the direction we're going is not the right direction, that we should be able, that the way we work, we should be able to make a 180 degrees turn and to look, assess ourselves, to understand ourselves and take a different direction, and to yeah to work in a different way. And I think, yeah, so it is inevitable that we have to work that way. The way it works at the moment, it's, as I mentioned before, we're using Jira. In each team, we have, so for example, my squad is made of one product manager, one product designer, um, two front-end engineers, one back-end engineer, and the data science lead, and then myself, who's technically in the team. I am counted as another front-end engineer. And every 2 weeks, which we call it a sprint, we uh, we set a goal of what do we need to achieve by the end of the sprint, because then we'll need to present that at our fortnightly meeting with the entire company. And yeah, so the product manager decides of what we work on. The product designer designs it on Figma, and then us as a front-end engineers, we just build, like we just break down the tasks in smaller tasks. The easier ones go to me, and and um, and then we, of course, we have conversations with the backend engineer and the data lead to then, of course, to kind of course, manage all the data and everything to then how to display that on our product. And yeah, every day we have a stand up, a very quick call about what we did the day before, what we're doing, what we're gonna be doing on that day, and we have also every week retro, so kind of like talking about what happened, how we worked that week, what went well, what didn't go well, what we could do better. And then after that, there's also weekly planning. So kind of like regrouping. It's like, okay, are we doing this? Are we wasting time on something? Did the priorities changed during the week? Because they kind of know maybe we have a new client, the client is not happy with something. Okay, let's focus on that instead of what we're working at the moment. So yeah, that's how it works.
Oh, that's um so yeah, I have another question. So and this is a startup, so these are no like these are a small company. As you say, there's high level of volatility. You need to be agile in that sense. So they work different at compared to big companies who are already consolidated. So I wonder, do you have freedom in choosing projects that you work to on? And sorry, do you have a freedom in choosing which projects you want to work on within the company?
To a certain extent. So imagine like in our team, we're working on 3 different products at the moment. So I'm assigned with my squad to one of them. So the fact that I am also in a junior position does give me at the moment more freedom, because what has been agreed on, you do have that pressure that at the end of that sprint you need to, resolve the cards that you've been assigned to work on, like tasks that you need to work on, which sometimes it did end up like, because I've been assigned some of them and then I started to stress out because, of course, my skills are very limited still at the moment, but also with the fact that I am working part time. So I'm not getting the full 2 weeks as everyone else to work on those tasks. So what was decided in the end, like, okay, let's be honest with each other. They started to assign me still some tasks, but it doesn't matter when they are done. Like they just need to be resolved at a certain point. We have something like in Jira, it's called the backlog. So you have the usual sprint with the table with all the tasks to do for those sprints. But then we have a backlog where like the engineers throw in their tasks and things that need to be resolved at a certain point in life. So usually I receive a mix of the two. Um, and of course, for example, there are moments where there's more work than in some moments than other moments. And also, again, don't forget that I am also juggling the front end part in the squad and the support, so helping with all the debugging too. But there, it does happen that sometimes there's like dead moments where there's not like a lot of work. In those cases, yes, I'll just go to another squad. And even before asking, I can go through their backlog and see what they have. And if there's any interesting card I'd like to take over myself and work on, I'll have a talk with my squad. It's like, oh, is it okay if I do this time? Because I think it will be a good learning experience for me. And if everyone agrees with that, I can take over that. But it's very subjective. It does depend by a lot of factors.
I see. That's very interesting. So, moving on to the end of this landing the job questions, what would you say personally are the most important qualities for a software engineer?
I think like it's not my own opinion, it's just what I have seen that it's been appreciated by other software engineers or other engineers in my company, which was mainly the resourcefulness and basically just taking the initiative yourself at doing something. Don't wait for someone else to fix that. If you see something is broken or something is not right, working right, and I'm not talking just about bugs, I'm talking also about like the way we work, the system that we work, or anything, take that initiative and make a suggestion, try to help fixing that. Um, because that's how, in the end, that's how like new technologies and new products have come up. Like if you do take that initiative and do it yourself and try to fix that particular issue. um and the other thing, I think like a lot of people, we many times get that pride. Like one thing like many people kept telling me, for example, like a kind of like a compliment, is that I have no problems in asking for help. I was like, how is this a skill? How is this a thing? And I did notice that in our industry, in the tech industry, maybe because we're all a bunch of introverts and we try to do things ourselves. Um, or because we're trying to impress, like, oh, if I do it all myself, then I can tell like I resolved this issue by myself. But many times what happens is that actually just because you try to do it yourself, it took you 3, 4, 5, or even one day more to fix that, rather than just asking for help. And then in the end, like maybe when you resolve that, like sometimes it did happen to me, like out of pride, like, oh, I've been asking for so much help, but for once I just want to do this all by myself. And I did manage to do that, but it made it so complicated. And then my manager comes in, he looks at my code that I pushed in GitHub, and he's like his fix was literally just one line after my like 30-line code. And then it was actually everything that you read now in 30 lines, you could have done this in this line over here. So yeah, don't be afraid to ask for help. Because even on a company perspective, you need to reach some goals. Um, there are some specific goals that you need to reach at that point. So time is crucial. Um, my manager basically tells me, if you're not able to do that in the first 30 minutes, the rest of the time that you're going to try to dedicate it to it is going to be wasted time. So I would rather you come to me, tell me where you're blocked, and then I'll try to unblock you, and then you move on. And that's how basically because then at the beginning we had like a meeting every week, like he could teach me and show me something, but then it became such a like natural thing, like I'm working on something and then I just send him a screenshot, like, I'm really stuck at this, I know you just assigned me this half an hour ago and I can already not move on with this task. Just tell me, like, what am I missing, what am I not seeing, what can you, or just like sometimes he just writes the first piece of code, like, okay, maybe try to use these hooks or do this is the first part, I think you can carry on from here, and then you move on. But yeah, like I think like we are in that kind of industry where we try to always like, oh, who's the best software engineer, and then they actually are there, everyone is really amazing, so you feel like quite dumb, or you get that imposter syndrome in the team, that, oh, if I'm not like them, that I'm gonna get fired, or they're not gonna think of me as a smart enough engineer compared to someone else. But then the moment you actually start asking for help and asking for mentorship or just teach me something, you'll find out that like how everyone is actually really really wants to do that. And then they start even telling you like, oh yeah, I was actually in your same position when you just started, I was actually really doubting myself too, but I wasn't as brave as you to ask for help. Which, like, why? So yeah.
That's really great advice, Julia. It's very calming to the heart to like hear that there is that type of environment out there. So that is the end for the landing the job questions. We do have a couple of questions in the chat. We have one from Ophelia. She says, I have one other question, which is quite often people often ask, why did you decide to make a career change in interviews or even networking with possible recruiters? As I'm changing career from a very different field, history of art and literature, it is super difficult to answer this question. As I was doing art, which is seen as opposed to math and science, what do you think would be a good answer to this question, and what would you answer if someone asked you this in the interview?
I think the best answer, it doesn't, first of all, you don't have to really tell exactly like the 100% truth. You try to sell yourself and they try to sell your company. Many times they even try to sell like, oh, our company is so good, we really care about our team, and then you actually join the company and it's not exactly what they thought. So like my advice is always like fake it until you make it, first of all. Um maybe it's bad advice, but anyways, but what I usually say is that it just it's a matter of my priorities have changed throughout my life. Um, like between me and you guys, it's because it is true, like at the beginning, I started as in hospitality. I would do everything to impress them. I would work crazy hours. I would say yes to every task they would give me. And I just want, and I did, in 6 years I became a manager, and I was like going up that ladder. Um, but then I just reached that point where I would just, and actually I told that like when I resigned, I spoke with the general manager. He's like, "Why are you leaving?" And then I told him like, "I love this job. I really love the job. I think it's a really interesting and the most exciting job. Um, but doesn't mean that I don't love my own life. I love my friends. I love my family. I love, you know, so I need a little bit of balance between the things. And also because I worked myself out so much at this job that I ended up hating it because I was just so stressed and overworked. Um, but as an answer to the recruiter, I would usually just say my priorities have changed throughout life, and also my interests have changed throughout time. We are as many times like to choose a role, when we are just teenagers, that then perhaps then in the future when you actually try new things, and you can perhaps talk about like an experience that you had, like maybe trying the first things in tech, like for example my mentorship, like I had the IT guy who told me like, oh, you actually made for to work in a more tech role. um yes, I think that's it. Yeah, yeah. Just tell them like my priorities have changed. I'm looking for more stability, and I just found myself that I actually do enjoy solving problems and or just building new things. And in any case, I think tech also does is not such a diverse world because it does have a part of creativity too. And I can tell that from experience from working as a front-end engineer. Um, it's a very exciting world. So you're just transferring again your skills to a different industry, but it doesn't mean that you're completely not applying, because I'm sure there's some soft skills or anything that you've been doing in your previous career that you can still apply in the new one.
Just to add a comment to this conversation, I think that's a great piece of advice, actually, because I think maybe when you're a career changer, people think, okay, like, okay, didn't you plan your career well, or you mean you don't are not that sure about your goals? But the reality is that we are humans. We are not robots. Like, are programmed with a sole mission in life, and we tend to change over time. So even I think for those who have focused in tech since the very beginning, maybe throughout their career they have felt a time where they wanted to change within specialisms. Like, for example, maybe you started out in software engineering and then you want to move on into machine learning or cybersecurity, because there are so many fields within the computer science. So actually something you can actually exploit that. Just say you are human. You change your priorities. You want to try something new now. So I think you have a good impression with that, and also like make emphasis of those soft skills as Julia mentions. You have learned in your previous career. There are always transferable skills.
Yeah, they are. And also I think like every employer is expecting that you are moving to a job as you know what your um dream job is, as like, oh, I know that I always wanted to be, and then this dot 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 role position. So they always somehow expect that passion about something, but actually there's like 5% of the entire population in the world is actually has an idea of what do they actually want to be as a profession, and they wouldn't do anything else in their entire life. Everyone else, so but it's so intrinsic into the culture of like this is your passion. I actually changed, and also that's another thing that I have been quite honest. Like I did change that just because also my priorities in life have been changed, not just from a perspective of what role I want to work for, but the lifestyle I want to have. I chose tech because I want to be paid more for the same 8 hours I'm working in the other industry. I have chosen tech because it does, many companies do provide amazing benefits that do give me that peace of mind in life, like health insurance, mental health aid, or any other perk that other companies do not. So, and again, and that's because my regular life is not as, it's as valued as my work life. So it can be just that. And so you don't, again, the people on the other side, they're people like you, and most probably they will empathize with your own answer if you're actually quite honest to it, rather than telling them the whole tran of, oh, because this has been always what I always wanted. I just woke up 10 years later, realizing that this is my passion. Like, no, like life happened, things have happened, and I just decided that this is actually the best thing in my life. And if they say something like, oh, what is, like, some people sometimes, what will make you like think that not gonna change again? I'm like, I'm putting so much effort into it. I'm studying for 3 years. I'm making a student debt, and I'm trying to, like, I'm putting so much effort into it. I will not wake up one day and just say, I'm changing again. This is really something that I enjoy doing, and I'm just need someone to trust me into the process, and help me to get there. That's it.
It's very endearing to hear. Um, before we move on to the like work-life balance questions, it's like a perfect transition because like you were mentioning about prioritizing certain aspects of your life and the work-life balance in general. But before we do, we have a question from Francis in the chat. He says, "Do you have any recommendations for any remote internships, or should we completely rely on physical like internships?"
Um, I think this is a very subjective question, because it really also depends by you. For example, in my company, we have a very flexible policy of like working in the office or not working in the office. The rule is do whatever you want as long as you're working. So sometimes I do go to the office, sometimes I don't. And also our office is here in London, but we have colleagues that are actually based in other countries. Um, so I do think, yes, I think depending on what your company does. For example, in IT, I worked in IT. It is definitely a kind of job where I would suggest, where find a job, like go to the office, even if it's not paramount or it's not a rule, go to the office, because in my first month, I had so many questions that if I had to do that remotely, I would spam the chat of my colleague to an annoying level. At least like I have the colleague next to me, and if I have a question, it's an immediate turnaround, ask the question, quick answer, and then you move on with your work. When as if it was a remote job, it would mean send a question, hope for them to look at the chat and answer, and then in the meantime, you're just blocked and perhaps you cannot carry on with your tasks. When in the role I am at the moment, it really does not really matter um, if I'm in the office or I'm not in the office. We use Slack as well for in the company too, and everyone is really, really active on it. So it's, I get the answer in almost real time for anything I need, or just jump on a quick call if there's something that I'm stuck on. Um, So yeah, I just think it's a subjective question. Depending on your role, probably if you're junior, start to try going at least the beginning as much as you can in the office, just because it's easier to make yourself acquainted with the work and learn from your team. Um, but it does really depend by you. We have colleagues that like just do not like being in the office. They just are not comfortable. Um, and you know, the company doesn't make them come to the office if they don't feel comfortable being there. So yeah, there's a lot of factors to take in account. Uh, but if you want to go for remote, I prefer personally remote just because I am from Italy. I live in London. My boyfriend is from Portugal. Sometimes we need to go and visit families, visit friends, and so on and so forth. So it is just easier instead of like asking for holidays all the time, just go work from there. So you get that kind of flexibility too. Yeah.
Yeah, and well, speaking of flexibility and well, lifestyle with your work, Philly has another question. So, do you think it is okay to admit to employers that lifestyle is something you care about? For example, ability to find a job that allows a lot of travel is something it's okay to mention in the interview, such things.
I think just mention to during your interview what is really important for you. Like if you think that when you start your job and the things that you want to ask for and they're not going to give them to you would really impact your life, then yes, mention them. For example, I immediately mention I'm going to study. Even in my previous, like in the IT job, I need to finish exactly at 6 p.m. Goodbye, I'm going home. I cannot do extra hours. I used to do that a lot. Like if you need to work for me extra, fine. But in this case, I am studying. I'm a full-time student. It's not even part-time. I'm a full-time student. I need every minute after work to dedicate to studying. So it is really important that for me. And and they say, yes, of course, like I understand six, if we'll need someone to work extra, we'll just ask somebody else. We know with you that that's something that is not negotiable. So yeah, you don't need to, if it's something that you're just curious about, like, of course, you cannot ask all the things. I think just choose those one, two, three things that are really important that you cannot really negotiate, um, and see how it goes. Because again, it's better to know during the interview then when you already start working, uh, and you're just in that position of, oh, I just started, because what happens also with a lot of my colleagues, like, oh, they just start working and they feel miserable at work, um, but then they don't have the time anymore to restart the whole interview process, the whole like redoing the resume and everything, and they just get stuck in a job that they actually don't really enjoy doing, and they stay there for 1 or 2 years. At least, if it doesn't work, it doesn't work. They're not made for you, you're not made for them. Fortunately, we are in an industry where, at least again, you, because we had a big conversation that in Slack in our general channel, that I know it doesn't apply to all the countries in the world. There are countries where it is hard to get a job, and you get what you get and then you move on with that. But like at least for us, is like our role is so much in demand that you can take, you can make a critical, you can have some critical thinking about it and then like make a critical decision. Is this also made for me or not? And ask them as well. Because maybe they didn't even think about it, not because they just don't want to do it. Maybe just they didn't think about it. Like it's not like they always have like students working at the same time.
Nice, nice. That's good to hear. That's a great piece of advice. Just a reminder again. Well, we've been asking your questions. If you have more, feel free to leave them in the chat, and we answer them after the end of the next section. So, okay, going back to the question we have prepared for you about worth ethic or like balance questions. So, when you're working with a team, how does your or your squad how does your position play a role in working on a project, from coding to planning, having meetings, etc.?
Well, being again in the junior role, I'm mainly just working on the tasks I am being assigned. That doesn't mean that when we discuss them, I do make questions like, why are we doing this, or why we're doing that? Isn't this more important, or whatever in design that is being built? I would look at this and like, I don't think that the user would find it very straightforward if this component behaves in this way. Um, but usually because also like the structure is everything comes from the product management. We recently have done a big restructuring of the team, so we all have, each squad has a product manager in the team, so they do have the discussion with the VP of product of what do they want to keep selling, what do they want to sell, what do they want to show to the clients, and then that what get passed on to the team, which then needs to build those features that are being requested in that specific amount of time if there are any deadlines. So yeah, it is a bit like a vertical, I would say, structure. But yeah, of course, like the moment we have our daily stand-ups, as I mentioned, like to hand over our job, or even we again we chat a lot. We have our even like squad channel. Oh, I'm doing this or I'm doing that. How does this look? Does this make any sense? And then we exchange notes and carry on with the work. Yeah.
Oh, nice, nice. Well, throughout the meeting, you have continuously mentioned about speaking with your peers, so who have more experience than you, and how helpful they have been with you. But okay, let's look a bit to the other side of the coin. So, how do you approach discussing technical aspects of projects with non-technical staff or non-technical stakeholders, if you have to do so?
I don't. And again,
Okay.
we are a team. We work in a team. It does, of course, happen. Sometimes you do feel isolated. For example, the senior management team feels like that a lot, I would say. Because like one day they gave me just recently, they gave me this this task to do, and I wasn't able to finish it in 2 weeks. Like new problems were coming up along every time something not working, and I was getting very frustrated. And then I kept like ask for help once, and then the second time, and then the third time, and then the fourth time. And then after 2 weeks, I went back to my manager again, like, I am so sorry. Like I cannot resolve this. This is way too complicated for me. Uh, and it's like, I don't know, I'm just not good for this. And he said, like, please, it happens to me too. The only difference is that I don't have anyone to go to because I'm the last one on the line chain, or the life chain, I would say. Um, if it does happen, again, we have like as well so many tools, especially with AI. Okay, you have Stack Overflow, but then now with AI, you need to be careful when you work in a company. Please, guys, don't do that. Don't copy pieces of code of your company because you're literally feeding private information to ChatGPT. If you haven't heard, like, read an article about Samsung where their product has been leaked because the teams kept copying pieces of their code into ChatGPT. So yeah, be careful to that. Um, but like again, we are already in a moment of life where, like, if you really don't have any help, we are lucky enough to live in the era where we have AI now. So if you're not like understanding why is this component or why is this thing behaving in this way, it's not allowing me to do what I want to do, or giving me this error, ask there, or ask a community, or ask Stack Overflow, or yeah, there's an unlimited amount of resources.
Okay, thank you for answering that. So you were mentioning about stress and like when you're trying to solve some type of problem, like that's work related. Um, so what do you do when you're stressed about like a project, and how do you like handle work related stress other than like what you just mentioned about like going to like higher ups and asking for like questions?
Um, I think it's always about like talking, because if you just keep things for yourself, it just really boils it up even more, and you just make yourself even more stressed and miserable. In our company, we do have some trained team that we call the mental health aiders. So if you feel um, stressed about something, you can just drop them a line and ask them like, can we have a chat? I just need to really um, just let this go, like just talk about this, talk about my frustration. Um, Other than that, also because thanks to the fact that like we are very flexible on the way we work, I can just say, I'm going for a walk. See you in an hour. Um, and you don't need to lie about that. You don't need to be like, oh, I have a doctor appointment. Like you literally, we have a channel where we just say hello, or I'm going for lunch, or I'm finishing now, or I'm finishing early today, but we'll continue with my work after dinner. You organize your own life, so that you can easily just say, oh, I'm finishing early because today's been really stressful, I'm stuck, I'm not able to be productive, I'll carry on tomorrow morning, I'll start a bit earlier. So yeah, go for a walk, go and have yourself a nice snack that knows that will improve your mood. But just recognize your points, but like in a more serious way. If it really does get really is really affecting you, then yes, I am gonna repeat myself. But then yeah, talk to your manager. That's what happened. For example, my big frustration was I was in a squad where I wasn't really able to help a lot because I didn't have enough skills to do that. Um, Although they didn't have the expectations for me to do that kind of work, but it would just didn't make sense. Like, then why am I here? You know, like you're not a charity company just paying for me to be here and listen. I need to do something. Um, and that's what I said, like, okay, like, and just it's imposter, like I felt like this imposter syndrome every day, like, oh, I'm not good enough because I'm not able to do anything. But that just because I am not skilled enough. Like I was in a team with all senior engineers, like what am I doing? Um, and I just told my supervisor and just said like, wouldn't it make more sense if? And he's like, yeah, it actually does make sense. I'm gonna speak with the VP of engineering. Let's see what she says, and take it from there.
Okay,
It's very
that's
interesting. So, you were mentioning a lot about like work ethic, and how like the environment and like the people you have around you, how you manage your certain tasks is like very supportive. If you want to go on a walk, you say you're gonna go on a walk. There's no reason to like, I guess, say something else. Is there anything else you like have to say about, or you feel like you want to say or emphasize on about the work ethic in your area of work, other than like what you just mentioned?
Well, we do get, for example, in my particular situation, we do get a lot of good perks. It doesn't mean that like the company I am in is like all like unicorns and rainbows. You know, there's like, it is a very stressful environment working in a startup. You know, it has its own risks, and its own pressure. But of course, like thanks to that, probably the turnover is not as big as in any other company would be, because if you do not take care of your people, of your employees, then someone will run away in that in this kind of competitive market. Because we are I worked in operations. When I was assistant, I was working directly with the human resources, and it is a very hard process and a very expensive process for someone to hire to hire an engineer and to be like a skilled enough engineer and to align with the values of the company too. Because that's another thing, for example, of this team. They're like, you can be the best engineer in the world, but if you don't align with the company, if you don't, their answers give that red flag of like, I don't think you would, you would not merge or like connect well with the other of the teammates, you're not going to be hired. And but they do learn a lot like from also their own mistakes. Also, one thing that also wasn't to mention to Ophelia about like all those technical interviews. I even got with this company, it started that I got my first interview, sorry, my second interview with Nplan for my EA position, for an executive assistant position, was a mathematical, like technical assessment. It was like questions like kind of like IQ test style questions. I'm like, okay. And I passed the first one, but I did not pass the second one. And I did not hear from them for months. And then months later, apparently they got a new talent acquisition manager who just went through the pool of the previous CVs, and he just found mine. And then he called me. He's like, look, I started 2 weeks ago and I've been going through the past CVs. We stopped doing the whole assessment about like assessing executive assistants. I would rather prefer having a chat with you. I'm not offering you any job. I'm just asking you if you're available for an interview. And that's how it went. So that's like another thing of like, people are still figuring it out. People like in HR and everything are still figuring it out themselves. So that's why like just because they made the interview in a certain way doesn't mean that like there's some, and you didn't pass doesn't mean that there's something wrong with you. Because then the second time I did pass and I'm with them and working with them. Yeah, I think that's it. Just be yourself. Try to tell the company what you're trying to achieve, what you're trying to work for, what your long-term maybe career goal is. Although I don't think that's something that exists anymore. As Sebastian said, tech is a very vast world. There's like many roles, and I start from one role and I didn't even expect. I thought like I would work towards some kind of like security DevOps role that I would be interested in. Like probably I thought like, oh, I would be interested in cybersecurity, but now like I don't want to do anything else rather than being a front-end engineer. So yeah, things can change. Don't just because it changed, like just go on with it. And we can learn. We are in an industry that you can learn the skills and just go on with it.
Yeah, sometimes it's just about knocking the door and putting yourself out there. And
Yeah.
maybe they reject you the first time, but you don't know what can happen left afterwards.
Yeah.
Just getting involved, we can open questions for open doors for you in the long run.
Yeah.
So, well, going towards the ending note questions before we do these ones, and then we check the chat if there are other more questions.
I think Ophelia.
So okay, yeah. No, sorry. There's another more question about work-life balance. So,
Okay.
how do you approach balancing work and life? Well, you've talked about this a bit, but you could expand on
Yeah.
that.
I think I am very far from like like many people, like they do have certain rules that they always follow and they're always very consistent about it. That's not me. There's no way. Because it does happen that sometimes at work you are working on something that you're really hooked by, or like a problem that you're trying to resolve, and are like, why is this not working? And I don't understand it, but it's a really cool thing I want to work on, and actually I don't want to stop doing that. And if it happens, fine, it's normal. There's gonna be happening, like it cannot like every day predict like how things are gonna go. But like a general rule is perhaps just set yourself, unless your office, like, okay, your office knows that it finishes, like you can finish work at 6. But like in my case, like we don't really have a start time and an end time. We have core hours 11:3, and then between that you decide when do you want to start and when do you want to finish. So in that case was like just set yourself like a time. Like if I want to work, for me, for example, is I want to work at least 8 hours or maximum 8 hours. So if I start at today at 9, at 5 or whatever the time is, yeah, at 5 I need to stop. Like put yourself a calendar reminder or something. Or if it's you start at 10, you finish at 6, and so on and so forth. Just set yourself some kind of a rule that this is the time like I should be finishing, and try to follow that rule at least 3 or 4 days out of 5. It doesn't have to be perfect. It just like try to be as consistent as you can. Of course, if like it's like 20 minutes more or less, it's not gonna be the end of the world. So and just like perhaps like it can be even like maybe today I'm gonna take like a longer break. It's been like a very stressful morning, just call after call after call, but then my afternoon it's actually is very calm. I'll just take a longer break and then I'll just finish a little bit later, or because you need to do something in the middle, you need to go somewhere or just want to go for the grocery shopping, whatever. Just kind of intertwining, my life with the work life. It doesn't just become two separate things, but they kind of just become like just merge the two worlds. It kind of just became my life. I work, I study, I do my everyday life things, and yeah, I did like, for example, because of my burnout, I did some just online therapy as well. Um, there was this called BetterHelp. They were like doing like talking to a therapist online for a little bit, just to kind of, because I was really scared. For example, I changed jobs so many times that I didn't want to sabotage myself to find something that is not working in this one too, because I thought like this is a really great opportunity. I don't want just to look like at the bad things about it. And or even just, for example, just talk to other people in there's like many forums or Discord forums or whatever. Just ask them like what is their experience, how are they doing, how are they going through this thing. And again, everyone has a different tactic and everyone can give you a lot of suggestions, but what's working for me will not work for you. Maybe you do need some more discipline to be like, oh, I need to finish at this time, and if I don't, like, I'll start becoming stressed out. But probably it's just about find something that works for you, whatever it is, and just like test it out. The Pomodoro technique, the finishing at that time, having bigger breaks, eating more, like reward yourself with snacks, whatever. So yeah, for me, works a little bit of everything. And the last thing I do suggest though is meditation. It sounds maybe a bit cheesy or anything, but I just struggle of like concentrating a lot of time, and like my brain um wanders a lot, like thinking about many things at the same time, and especially like us like working and studying and trying to do everyday things, like a lot of thoughts. I think like meditation, it is a good thing to do at the end of the day before going to sleep, to kind of get that good rest before a new day starts.
Nice, nice. Good pieces of advice over there. So, well, let's pick up Ophelia's question, which I think is a really, I find it fun, and I think it's a really good question. I like it. So, as a front-end engineer, do you actually like working with CSS?
I do. I mean, um I do like not we don't because I use React. We used to have like using like generic CSS, but then they changed to Tailwind, which actually is pretty fun. And I think it's like easier to read. I see. Well, I think that's the thing. That's one thing I noticed. Like the backend engineers, they have absolutely no patience at trying to do something in the front end. And you could see that because like when I joined, I was right in between, like when the team was really small. So a lot of engineers were almost like almost doing a little bit of everything, almost like a full stack. And you would see like the people who were doing like the backend engineer who tried to like throw some front end bits in there, like our product engineer would look, the product designer will look at it as like, what is this? What is this mess? Like, no, there's no way. When front end engineer is more a little bit like the other way around, like a little bit more of that OCD to have things look good and be the design to look exactly like the one in Figma, even to like the smallest pixel, the smallest detail, and perhaps like get more stuck into the actual coding and connecting everything with the data and populating it with the data around that. But that just means, Ophelia, that you are definitely a backend engineer and go for that. um, so yeah, no, I do enjoy that.
It's really great to hear. It's very insightful too.
Question following from this. So, yeah, as I said in the chat, like everyone has different likings on what technologies they like to use. Well, you mentioned already some of the technology you've used, and I wanted to ask you, which one is your favorite? Like, which language you love working with, or is there anything in specific you really like about, programming in tech? Something you'll find really satisfying?
Um, I do actually enjoy the things. I cannot compare it with too many technologies because I haven't been using so many of them, but I think I do really like working with React, for example. And I think that's also what kind of gave me that extra like it did transmit that interest into the front end. It's a really nice framework or library to work, yes, to work with, because you do combine three different languages in or even four, because sometimes we do have like components written in JavaScript and then others are written in TypeScript. Um, and then we have also like something like in Python too. So I do like how malleable and it is, and how you can use that tool for so many different things. And with the npm, you can add so many interesting packages to it. And for example, in our work, we work a lot, like we need to create like a lot of graphs, different kinds of graphs. So then you use like a D3.js library for that. And then on top of that, you can use like something like we use the VSX, which is like a library that was created by the Airbnb to create different kind of graphs, which is really cool. So you can, yes, you can approach and try and test and do some like many things. So yeah, I do like React a lot.
All right, that's very insightful. So, we are getting near the end of this event, but before we do, we have like a couple more questions. If anyone in the audience has any personal question about like this topic about I guess work ethic and work life balance, please feel free to ask them in the general chat or the Q&A section. But without further ado, let's move on to the ending note questions. All right, so what are some things do you think that people usually like overlook based on like preconceived notions before like choosing this specific field in like the tech industry? And what do you think they should know beforehand so they can have like more realistic expectations?
Um, I think I kind of already mentioned it, but just to go more into it, it was that preconceived feeling that everyone is just the best and it's so smart, and that you will never achieve that level of knowledge. When you're talking to them, perhaps they have at least as many doubts as you because they're looking up to someone else in the team or outside the team. So um, yeah, I think this is the thing that I have felt more, because not talking about my own personal experience, but again, also talking to other people and other colleagues, and also because why Sebastian, like he read that, like I kind of brought it up in the Slack channel because I did speak with like some of the students, you know, for one reason or the other, and they find out that I already work in tech, and they would say like, oh, I would never be able to do this, or like I'm really scared about uh, even doing the interview because I will never pass it. I will never be able to do that. Um, so, but actually, yes, that's not entirely true. We are all starting, you know, with the same more or less kind of tools, and we all having the same amount of material. But again, like myself, for example, I would never expect from myself to know as much as that person, especially because I work and study at the same time. I don't have that time to upscale my skills at the same pace with someone who, for example, just studies and is able to not work at the same time. It's physically impossible for those two things to happen simultaneously. So yeah, just be realistic with your skills, and I understand like maybe some things you don't know, it's not because of you, but just because there's not enough time in your life, or you know, enough resources, or other life situations. So yeah, just kind of like I would say, just don't get that pride go into your way to find opportunities to learn from someone else just because you don't want to, or you're scared to ask for help because you're scared that they will think less of you. um yeah, that.
All right, thank you for that. So the last and final question, although you gave us very good points, very good pieces of advice throughout this entire event, is there anything that you would like to like finally say about like what you would want to suggest or advise to a student who is just starting this journey?
um I think it's just, don't assume that you already have it all figured it out. um it's never going to be the case. And yes, do have a plan to what do you want to become, or what do you want to do, or the goal, it doesn't have to be always, for example, I didn't know what I wanted to do as in my future career. I knew I wanted to leave hospitality, but I didn't know what I wanted next. And I always like the question I was making myself was, oh, what is my passion? Like, oh, I like cooking. I like doing a little bit of this. I like to become, but do you want to become a cook? Like, no, I don't want to become a cook. Or so instead of like the question became, what kind of career will make my life more comfortable and with a more peace of mind? And that's how like together with like some, of course, some interest in tech too, it became this. Um, but yeah, I think it's just like, yeah, don't set yourself, don't be too strict on one particular path. Try different things. Also because, as we mentioned in all these calls, like the skills are transferable. You know, like even like on a very tech perspective, like, okay, you want to become front-end engineer, you want to become a back-end engineer, you want to become a cloud engineer, you want to become many things, but then AI is kicking in. So probably in the future, you know, and then you did like an ML course in the meantime. In the future, probably none of these roles will exist if you don't implement a bit of AI into it. So yeah, like be as flexible as possible and never assume that you know everything. There's no way in the world that you know everything. And yeah, don't be scared to dig up the answers.
Yeah, well, those are really good words to end it. However, there's another question from Ophelia. So it's more of a personal question. Maybe you could give us a peek into that. So she says, I'm interested also in more personal questions for Iulia. What brought you to London after Italy, and what do you like about living in the UK? I am asking as someone who loves Southern Europe and I wanted to live in a Latin Romance language speaking country for most of my life, as I love the culture, food, weather, or the places so much. Yeah, she's Northern European, but in Northern Europe, we always will live in Spain, Italy, or Portugal. So I think that's a really interesting question.
That's a very interesting sorry, question, because I'm the other way around. Like, I would love to live in Norway or in Denmark or in Germany, for example. Um, I think it really like depends what you're looking for. You're always looking for something that you don't have in your own country, you know. What we are missing in Italy is a more simple bureaucracy, and just for like a government that like cares more about their own people. To make it like, I don't want to make this call too political, but yeah, um what brought me to UK was just the fact like how easy it was to transition to this country and to adapt to this country. Um, I After 2 years, I actually moved out because I work in hospitality, and I did choose hospitality because I could work in any country of my choice if I could. So I moved to Mallorca, to Spain, for 9 months. But then I kept talking about like how London is great, how we do things in London, and London this and London that. Like, I was hearing myself like annoying myself. Oh, oh, look at that. Um, yeah. And then yes, and then basically it kind of felt like I was going back to Italy with the same kind of like bureaucracy and the same kind of like mentality into the people. I love London. Like, it's not really about UK. For me, it's really about London, and how London has this like very open mentality. You can be whoever you want, you can do whatever you want, and London gives you that freedom and opportunity to do that. It is expensive, but it's a price that I am willing to pay in order to get in life where I want to go, or have the freedom to change my life if I feel that in my previous life wasn't comfortable for me anymore. Something that for example, in Italy is not as easy to do. It started with me leaving because I just needed a job, and the way I was working, my first jobs in Italy were very like, I was very underappreciated and working long hours for very little pay. Where here was like everything I was doing, it felt like, oh my God, you're so good at this. Like, but I just literally did this. It's nothing. So yeah, it's just that mentality that made me move there. I do agree. I'm not saying that South Europe is not great, but I think it's great for 2 weeks, 1 month, but then coming back to your own
Well, I mean,
country. Yeah,
you said it in the very beginning, like, and we are crave what we don't have.
yeah,
So yeah,
exactly.
I like a quote from someone. I mean, they mentioned that in an internal GDSC meeting, like the moon that in a country they say the moon is always brighter in another country. So
Yeah.
something that
In
happens, but in the
English,
end,
yeah,
oh, sorry,
yeah. No, in English is the lawn is always like the grass is always greener. Uh,
yeah.
like on the other side, like to your neighbor. What's the I forgot the quote, but yeah. But anyway, also to Ophelia, if you want, because I know like we're getting quite overboard with this meeting. Like, also feel free to text me on Slack. I'm sure like we're all in there. We can always. Yeah, thank you, Ophelia. Thank you, girls. Yeah,
Yeah,
you can
yeah.
text me also personally. Hmm.
It's always interesting to listen, how things are in different sides of the world. And as you know, we are part of a different community, and just here in the call, like, we are from America, we are from in Europe, we are in Asia. So I mean, this is just an example of how it's spread that we are all over the world. And well, it's
Yeah,
always interesting to know about
yeah,
that.
and
And
that's
also myself, like, well, she mentions she likes Southern Europe. I've been interested in Italy for a long time. In fact, that's what I'm learning the language, and I got to know Iulia through that as well. So, well, it was interesting. So I
yeah,
think this leads towards the end of our talk. And thank you, Julia, for joining us today. And well, really, we had this idea of doing a Let's Talk Tech event and for a while, and you actually put some spark to it with your your thread in Slack, and also that provides some motivation to get started. Really, again, I'm happy to listen to all the feedback in the chat, and actually it's really good to listen from somebody who is just getting started in tech, who is a career changer, see this profile, this perspective, which is quite unique. And I think so many people within our community who are also career changers and will benefit from your insights. So thank you very, very much for all of that.
Yeah. And thank you for listening to me for almost 2 hours with all these questions. Yeah, absolutely. As I mentioned, not just for Ophelia, everyone who does feel a little bit scared or insecure or just want to have a chat about like trying to find a job or just in general, feel free to text me on Slack. I'm not the best at responding because I have Slack also for work, so sometimes I don't get notification because I have Slack open, but it's on my like work Slack open, and then I forget my uni one. So many times like it takes me a long time to reply back. But please don't take it as a sign or anything that I'm not going to. I will. I'm still at uni. I still need to go on Slack and work with everyone. So yeah, feel free to text me or anything. Happy to answer any more questions or just out of curiosity if you want to know more things. Absolutely, not a problem.
Yeah, of course, of course. All right, so that is a wrap for this event. Thank you to everyone who made time out of their schedule to attend this live event. I really hope you learned something new or made you inspired to want to specialize in like a similar direction. Personally, for me, it really warmed my heart to really listen to like Julia's stories and experiences. But yeah, so please follow our socials. I actually pinned them in the chat box. It includes our GDSC UoL page, like website, Instagram, LinkedIn, and YouTube. And mentioning YouTube, there's going to be a recording of this specific event posted on our YouTube channel. So if you know anyone who wasn't able to make it to this event, or you just want to rewatch the event, please feel free to let others know that there is this event recorded on our YouTube channel. But without further ado, a very, very special thank you to Iulia for taking time out of your schedule. We really, really value your time. We really appreciate you being here. Thank you so much.
Thank you guys. Thank you again for organizing this. It was really fun. Thank you.
All right. Okay, so that is the end of this event. Thank you, everyone. Bye bye.
Thank you.
Bye.
Bye guys. Bye
See you
bye.
another time.
Bye.